I don't think Drake thinks he can stand toe-to-toe with Kendrick and do that. Because does the risk really outweigh the reward? I think he knows that it might not be too smart to engage in this one. But listen, I could be wrong. I hope I am, because I'd love to see these two actually engage in a beef. That would be super exciting for hip-hop. I'm sure he knows that Kendrick is trying to bait him into a full-out beef. I'm sure he knows that it would take a lot of exhaustion and effort to actually keep up lyrically with the type of diss tracks Kendrick would throw at him. And I'm sure he knows Kendrick has a diss track waiting and ready for when Drake gives his response. So what does Drake actually stand to gain by engaging in a beef with Kendrick? How could he even come at Kendrick? What could he say?
Lobries and Gentlegrams, in today's episode of Lobry in Gentleland, we'll dissect how a short-measured dental man concocted a special plan, carefully sketched and spanned, and I say dental cause just like a crown on a weak tooth, the culture's crown was placed upon a weak goof. Lobriana, the Marilyn Monroe-y hoe, reigned supreme in the Billboard show till just 1 year ago, when, just like a dentist in a tooth crevice, Mr. Duckworth surgically removed the junk. With just one verse, he took hip-hop out of its funk. So stick with me as we unpack how 1 year ago King Kung Fu Kenny brought real hip-hop back to that. Oh man, Lobbies and Gentlegrams, do you guys remember 2023? It feels like a lifetime ago. Ever since then, we've gotten 3 petitions from the BBL balding bearded buffoon, 5 Grammys, a double platinum album, and a Super Bowl performance, and a stadium tour from Kendrick Lamar, and about 4,285 Big Macs guzzled by the grimace gaveling Graham Glazer, DJ Big Mac a Snackademics. Oh, and drop a subscribe and like if you think Big Mac a Snackademics is wider than a turnpike. Now, when it comes to Drake, Lobbies and Gentlegrams, we will be going way back, not focusing on the future, but instead the past. Because remember when Kendrick rapped, I resolved inside that private hall while sitting around with Jay, he said, it's funny how one verse can F up the game. That was way back in 2015. He was referencing the Control verse, and little did we know that that one Control verse would have a ripple effect that caused Kendrick to not F up the game one time with one verse, but spin back around over 10 years later and do the same thing with a second verse. This time on a whole different proportion. I'm talking on a scale larger than Big Mac a Snackademics. Alright, I'll leave him alone now. 2023, a year defined by, I don't even know what. What can you define 2023 by? What was memorable to you in music, in hip-hop, when you think 2023? Was it Travis Scott's comeback album, Utopia? Maybe you think about For All the Duds, For All the Dogs. Maybe you think about that one song that Cole and Lobry had on that album called First Person Shooter, because that song was the first time in a while where we heard 2 of hip-hop's biggest titans come together to celebrate their greatness. And we needed that form of lyrical sparring at that time. If you want a reminder on just how slow, at least mainstream hip-hop, was in 2023, First Person Shooter was the only hip-hop song that year to hit #1 on the Billboard charts, unless you count Doja Cat's Paint the Town Red or Jack Harlow's song Lovin' On Me. That's what was going on in hip-hop in 2023. The most successful female rapper that year was Ice Spice. The highest selling rap album that year was Drake's For All the Dogs, which had a critic's score of 5.3 out of 10, his lowest rated album. Hip-hop's overall market share within music was the lowest it's been in the entirety of the streaming era, with record labels actively investing less into hip-hop artists and more into country and Latin artists. Again, unless you include those Doja Cat and Jack Harlow songs, it took hip-hop 10 months in 2023 before it saw a #1 song on the Billboard charts with First Person Shooter. That's one #1 hip-hop song the entire year compared to 2018, which had 8 #1 hip-hop songs. Something needed to change, a spark needed to happen, and were Cole and Lobry gonna do that with First Person Shooter? Well, you could say that was one of the more exciting moments that we saw in 2023, with both of them going back and forth, professing their greatness, finally acknowledging the long-standing fan acclamation that them and Kendrick Lamar were the top 3 guys within the culture, the ones making the most noise, generating the greatest impact, selling the most records, and rapping the best. But when you really break it down, when hip-hop from a numbers perspective is at a multi-year low, when labels are actively saying, okay, let's invest less in hip-hop and more in other genres, was it really the best time to celebrate being at the top of the game? Cole saying, right now I feel like Muhammad Ali, Drake saying he's the GOAT. I mean, if you two are the ones running the game and the game is in this state, what does that say about what you're bringing to hip hop when you have all this influence, when you're the #1 guy? When Drake's mentor Wayne was the #1 guy, he gave us the Carter 3 and single-handedly ushered in this entire new generation of rappers, from the look, the aesthetic, the fashion, the auto-tune, the voice, the face tats, the dreads, influence on another level. Same thing can be said for Kanye West when he outsold 50 Cent with Graduation, an album so good that people still use it to excuse his horrible actions of praising the Mustache Man. Or what about when 50 Cent was at the top of the game, shaking it up so much so to the point that Jay-Z had to look at all of his artists on Rockefeller Rockefeller and warned them to get their projects out before 50 Cent made it much harder to do so. My point is, when you have that crown, what are you doing with it? What type of influence are you bleeding, and what type of legacy will you be leaving? For Cole and Aubrey, it was about professing their greatness, but not about pushing things forward. Instead, almost celebrating their run as if this was a retirement game. First-person shooter is like when an athlete gets their jersey hung up in their final game. Everybody's hugging on stage, everybody's praising each other, we're all acknowledging the amazing contributions you guys brought into the sport, but that song was really a reflection of the past, their past legacy, not what they were trying to bring into the future. And instead of it being a competition of who was going to take that #1 title of the big three into the next generation, it was more about them looking at each other like the Spider-Man meme, celebrating the fact that they both made it to the pinnacle of hip-hop excellence, but at a time when hip-hop, artistically and commercially, arguably was at its lowest. But Cole and Aubrey didn't want to address that. They wanted to celebrate the fact that they were the best when the genre was at its worst. But there was one man who was going to give us the truth. One rapper who was going to call it for what it was. While the camaraderie of first-person shooter was great, competition within hip-hop was almost non-existent. Who was going to take the torch from Cole and Aubrey? Who would be the next runner-up? Who would be hip-hop's next superstar? Who would make the next classic album? When was the last time we got a classic album? In a pivotal time when hip-hop needed these questions answered more than ever, there was only one man courageous enough to stare down the scope of the first-person shooter, point the gun the opposite direction, and tell the crowd, "I'm the captain now. The Kung Fu Compton captain."
My intent, I think from day one, was to always keep the nature of it as a sport. I don't care how motherfuckers look at it as far as like, that's a collaborative effort, you know, that's cool too, but I love when artists grit their teeth. What I will say about this year, it was more from a space where I think a lot of people was putting rap to the back and you didn't see that grit, you didn't see that bite anymore. So I always took that in consideration in going into any type of my music.
It was very easy for Cole and Aubrey to make first-person shooter, knowing that Kendrick was working on himself and not on hip-hop. He just got off at telling us he wasn't the savior, and he just got on to tour, bringing his Mr. Morale album across the world and bringing his fans a collection of music almost as empty as a McDonald's after it's visited by Big Mac Akademiks. What I mean by that is we hadn't gotten any new music from Kendrick Lamar for over a year and a half. And between Damn and Mr. Morale, aside from a Black Panther soundtrack, we didn't get a single album from Kendrick for 7 years, with Mr. Morale documenting Kendrick's journey through therapy and the album's final track literally ending off saying, "Maybe it's time to break it off, run away from the culture to follow my heart." This seemed as though it was Kendrick professing to us that his journey wasn't in alignment to his peers. Cole was saying, "Right now I feel like Muhammad Ali." Kendrick was rapping, "Sorry I didn't save the world, my friend. I was too busy building mine again." That's why it was so easy for first-person shooter to exist with no questioning. Kendrick, while he was more polarizing in his delivery, expressed the same message way back in 2013 on his Control verse, name dropping everyone in the game that he thought was the greatest at the time and saying, "I got love for you all, but I'm trying to murder you guys." What's so different about that? And Cole saying, "We're the big three, me, K-Dot, and Aubrey, but I feel like I'm Muhammad Ali, I'm the greatest." It's the same message. The only difference was in 2013, there was a lot more backlash because a lot more people were gunning for that crown, whereas in 2023, 10 years later, competition was so low, so stagnant that no one batted an eye at Aubrey calling himself the GOAT or Cole calling himself Muhammad Ali. And with them even inviting Kendrick to be on that song, the last thought in their mind was that the short-statured, sharpshooting assassin would come out of therapy with an unprecedented vengeance that hadn't been matched in over a decade. My temperament bipolar, I choose violence. What a time to be alive. March of 2024. The year kicked off how most years for hip-hop in the 2020s decade have gone. The first quarter is usually the slowest. We had a couple decent major releases. Kanye and Ty Dolla $ign went #1 with Vultures 1. 21 Savage delivered us his last solo album. Schoolboy Q delivered a phenomenal body of work with Blue Lips. And all eyes were on Future and Metro Boomin, who had announced that they'd be dropping 2 collab projects together. We knew these would be great. Future was at the top of his game. Metro had given us his best body of work with Heroes and Villains just about a year prior, but was this expected to be something that would change hip-hop forever? Not exactly. And the project started off pretty much how you'd expect it to be. Hard-hitting beats, strong hooks, nothing boundary pushing, but it was a solid trap album. You guys remember where you were, like when you first heard this? I'm a big Future fan, so I was sitting at home, like waiting for it to release, played it the second it came out. If I remember correctly, they had already previewed 2 songs off the project. Cinderella with Travis Scott, and this one song that had this infectious loop on the beat that just kept going da-na-na, da-na-na, da-na-na. Metro had previewed this at a club a couple times. Funny enough, Travis Scott came out when Metro and Future did a set at Rolling Loud the night before the album released, and he told them, play this song specifically. He said, play that da-na-na, da-na-na, da-na-na. And at the time, Future actually had a second verse on the song. So you figured, or at least I did, that this would just be another solo Future song. But I definitely knew just from hearing that beat, from hearing the hook when they previewed it, that this would be the hit off the project. But nothing could brace me for what we were about to hear. They did the classic, don't put any of the features on the track list, so every feature is a surprise. Before Like That, we already got surprise features from The Weeknd, Playboi Carti, Travis Scott on the project. So again, it was off to a decent start. Nothing revolutionary, but it was solid. But then Future's first verse finishes up, the hook ends, you get that sample, he was once a thug from around the way, and then boom, just like that, hip-hop would change forever. Just the way Kendrick starts off this verse alone, like, you could tell the type of energy he's on. And not one bar is wasted. He starts it off, these guys are talking out of their necks, don't pull no coffin out of your mouth, I'm way too paranoid for a threat. On First Person Shooter, J. Cole said, we're turning your song to a funeral. On this track, Kendrick starts off saying, these guys are talking out of their necks, which is obviously an expression for talking crazy, but your neck being connected to your throat, he's saying, don't pull a coffin out of your mouth. Don't start talking crazy because it might end up leaving you deceased. You might pull that coffin right out of your mouth from the words that you're speaking. And him saying, I'm way too paranoid for a threat, lets you know one thing, right? While Cole and Labrie were hugging and kissing on stage, doing the Spider-Man meme, pointing at each other, asking who's the GOAT, embracing, collaboration over competition, Kendrick took that whole song as an FU. Like, I'm out here finding my peace, I'm on the sidelines, and you guys are choosing now, when I'm on tour, when I'm silent, to start talking like how you're talking on First Person Shooter. The greatest part is that Kendrick flipped that whole thing around by dropping Like That when Drake and J. Cole were on tour together. That whole First Person Shooter song, they're talking about being as big as the Super Bowl. The tour was called Big as the What? And right as that tour ended off, Kendrick released this song that would later end up landing him a spot on that Super Bowl stage. And he continues letting you know what type of time he's on, what he's ready for. He says, let's get it, bro. DOT, the money, power, respect. The last one is better. And, when the 1 year anniversary rolls around for Euphoria, 616, all the diss tracks, we'll go through them like this, at least if you guys want that. Drop a comment if you want me to review all the diss tracks on their 1 year anniversary. But that whole trifecta of money, power, respect was a reoccurring theme within Kendrick's later diss tracks. But it changes so slightly with each track. On 616, he raps trifecta, money, morals, and culture. That's my leisure. And on Euphoria, he's comparing himself as a parent to Drake as a parent, saying he's teaching his son morals, integrity, and discipline, and that Drake doesn't know anything about that. And notice how he didn't include money in that trifecta. And unlike that, he starts off saying money, power, respect, but he says the last one is better. The respect is the most honorable thing to attain out of that trifecta. We know this was already targeted at Drake because his whole career has been about attaining the money and power. But as Kendrick dissects him on his diss tracks, he's showing the world that while Drake might have the money and power, he never truly attained the respect from the culture. And him saying DOT, the money, power, respect, DOT obviously spelling out dot, like K dot, his former stage name, but also the letters DOT standing for the three record labels of Cole, Labrie, and Kendrick. DOT. D for Dreamville, O for OVO, and T for Top Dog Entertainment. Kendrick is saying the last one is better. Again, not one bar wasted here, and he's telling you from the beginning of this verse who he's talking to. The next bar being, there's a lot of goofies with a check, a direct callback to the former line when he says, the money, power, respect, but the last one is better. The respect is better than the money, because there's a lot of goofies with a check. Goofy being a double entendre as well as check, since obviously goofy means like a goofball, like the gavel guzzling goofball Graham, but also being the name of the dog in the Mickey Mouse show. Drake's last album, when this verse was released, was For All the Dogs, and there's a lot of callbacks to dogs and For All the Dogs in particular. Check not only being a reference to obviously a paycheck, like a lot of goofies having a lot of paychecks, a lot of goofies having money in this game, but also being the fact that Drake's biggest sponsor was Nike. Nike's logo is a check. Very apparent he's talking to Drake right at the start of this verse. But don't get it twisted. This was as much of a shot to Cole as it was to Drake. Drake was the main target here, but Kendrick was letting Cole know he could get it too. With the next bar being, I hope them sentiments symbolic. My temperament's bipolar, I choose violence. Him saying, I hope them sentiments symbolic means, I hope all that talk you were talking on First Person Shooter, you feeling like you're Muhammad Ali, you feeling like you're the GOAT, I hope that's not genuine. I hope that's symbolic, that's expressive, that's performance art. You're just putting on a role of being the greatest. You don't really mean that. Because again, right, think of the dynamics of where hip-hop was at when First Person Shooter was released. Competition's at an all-time low. Impact is not on the level it was just a few years prior. They're talking all this go talk when the sport is in critical condition. So Kendrick's saying, I hope all that talk was not genuine, because if it is, I'm choosing violence. Like, I'm here for whatever smoke you want. If you say you're the best and you really mean it, here's my warning shot. I'm on violent time right now, bipolar, because just about a year ago, I was saying, I choose me, but right now, I choose violence. And he emphasizes that on the next bar, saying, let's get it up. It's time for him to prove that he's a problem. This is a shot at both of them, but I think this is where he really goes at Cole. When he's talking about, the whole respect thing, that's where I think it ties more into Drake. He's saying, you kind of cheated or gamed the system. Like, you got all these #1 hits, you got to where you are by cosplaying, by generating repetitive formulas, by going the pop route, by stealing other sounds. In terms of whose pen deserved more respect and who years prior were talking like they were ready for any lyrical conflict with any rapper, that was J. Cole. Johnny P's Caddy, he was talking about, I'm the best rapper alive, headshot, now go and ask the best rapper that died, they'll tell you he never lied. On Middle Child, he's talking about, if I smoke a rapper, it's going to be legit. First Person Shooter, again, all that talk about being Muhammad Ali. Kendrick is saying it's finally time for him to prove he's a problem, and I can't wait to review 7 Minute Joe with you guys. That's one that definitely gets overlooked a lot and addresses a lot of what we're hearing in this one verse from Kendrick. But he continues, again, going back to the clip I played you guys from his Apple Music interview, where he's talking about what motivated him to drop like that and, have the 2024 run that he did. He was saying it's because he felt like hip-hop was at the back burner. People weren't talking about hip-hop like they were maybe 10 years prior. And it was songs like First Person Shooter embodying, collaboration over competition that left the sport in this kind of stagnant spot. So Kendrick follows it up by rapping, it's time for them to prove that they're a problem. They're clicking up, but they can't be legit. No 40 water. Again, he's hoping those sentiments are symbolic. He's hoping they're not legit. And here he's saying they're hugging and kissing on stage, they're collaborating, but it cannot be legit. That vengeance, that violence cannot be legit. Plus, referencing E40's collective, The Click, but also referencing when Drake rapped on First Person Shooter saying, I'm down to click up on you guys and make a crime scene. Or Cole rapping on Middle Child saying, if I smoke a rapper, it's going to be legit. Kendrick here saying, they're clicking up, but it cannot be legit. And I love all these little, intermediary lines, if that's what you call them, like when he goes, or when he goes, get up with me, or hey, let's get it, bro. Like, this literally sounds like if you're about to squabble up, like you're jumping around waving your fist in the air and you're like, yeah, come on, get up with me. This is like theatrical. Like, you could picture Kendrick in the booth jumping around, like just ready to spar up, and then he lets it off. Like, if you had any doubt he was talking about Labrie and Cole, this next bar throws that all away. F sneak dissing, First Person Shooter, I hope they came with 3 switches. Again, showing the world that, he took First Person Shooter as a diss. A sneak diss, but a diss. And later in Euphoria, he'd obviously tell Drake, I hate the way that you sneak diss. I hate the way that you throw these little subtle shots instead of coming direct. What did he say on First Person Shooter? Like, who the GOAT? Something about December to January, it's just you and Cole. Where's Kendrick in that? There's the sneak diss for you. So, First Person Shooter, I hope they came with 3 switches. Like, if they're out here sneak dissing, I hope they got 3 pieces on them. They're gonna need that. Like, they're talking about the big 3. They're gonna need 3 guys just to take me down. Just to take one guy down. And he continues, I crash out like F-rap, diss Melly Mel if I had to. Melly Mel being a pioneer within hip-hop, and Kendrick going at hip-hop's 2 biggest titans at the time, Drake and Cole, in 2024. He's saying, I'll take it all the way back to 1970s if I have to. If I gotta diss Melly Mel to protect my spot, my legacy within this, I'll diss anybody. Crash out like F-rap. Like, this is mine. Then he goes, got 2 T's with me. I'm snatching chains and burning tattoos. It's up. Lost too many soldiers not to play it safe. 2 T's being the name of Kendrick's bodyguard. The director of security at Top Dog Entertainment. And on Untitled 2, a track way back in 2016, Kendrick even rapped, 2 T's told me I'm the one, I could put a rapper on life support. And in terms of, snatching chains and burning tattoos, it's funny how those bars played out, right? I mean, not only did Kendrick rap on Mother I Sober in 2022 saying, I know their secrets, every other rapper S abused, I see him daily burying their pain in chains and tattoos. And that's obviously, far before the beef, but long after the beef, we see Drake rocking tattoos that he very well should be burning off his skin. I believe he has a Rihanna tattoo. Him and LeBron had a falling out over this beef. He's got LeBron tatted on him. And worst of all, on Not Like Us, Kendrick rapped, effed on Wayne's girl while he was in jail, that's conniving, then get his face tatted like a B apologizing. Drake can never look at that Lil Wayne tattoo that he has on him the same. He was most literally burning tattoos. And he continues emphasizing that, his sentiment is not symbolic. He's talking literally, not figuratively. He says, if I walk around with that stick, it's not Andre 3K. Andre 3K, a couple months prior, had just released a flute album. A flute being a musical instrument in the shape of a stick. Kendrick saying if he's picking up a stick, it's not the same way Andre 3K is. He's picking up a literal stick. And J. Cole, funny enough, also had a song called Stick, where he rapped, I'll still treat a ride through the hood like a hike in the woods, got a stick that I take with me. This was most definitely a shot at Cole as much as it was at Drake. But with Cole, the shots were more like, let's see if these sentiments are legit. Let's see if you're really about it. Like, if you pick up the stick, is it like Andre 3K, or are you really picking up a stick and you're ready for war? It's time to prove you're a problem. With Drake, it was more like, I hate the way you walk, talk, and dress. You have no respect. You are not part of this culture. With Cole, it was more of a competitive thing. With Drake, I think it was like, I literally do not like your character and what you bring to hip-hop. I need to take you out. And you'll see that with the next few bars. And Kendrick saying, like, you think I'm playing? He says, you think I won't drop the location? I still got PTSD. And then, of course, the most monumental bar, potentially of this beef, definitely of this song, Mother F the Big Three, it's just Big Me. That's him dropping the location. He's like, you think I won't drop the location? F the Big Three. It's done. No Big Three talk anymore. And, like, on a side note, like, Drake is dropping R&B albums. Cole is dropping songs like Grippy. Like, the Big Three conversation is done. Kendrick rapped, it's funny how one verse can F up the game. It's funny how one bar can dismantle your name. Like, there's no longer this Big Three conversation. It's about who is the greatest. The crown is heavy. And he showed you with every move he made after this verse, the whole 2024, that he is the sole proprietor of the crown. It's not something that could be shared any longer. This is not about collaboration, it's about competition. And then he really goes at Drake. I mean, I'm really like that. Your best work is a light pack. Prince outlived Mike Jack. Do I need to explain these bars to you? Have you not heard enough about the whole, Prince and Michael Jackson subplot of this beef? I mean, if you haven't, all right, let's unpack it. We'll unpack it the same way Big Mac, a Snackademics unpacks a freshly wrapped Big Mac. Prince and Mike Jack, all right? There's only one crown here. Prince and Michael Jackson had a little competitive rivalry of their own, right? You could really make the argument that they were two of the greatest artists of all time, but very different in their delivery, in their legacy. Michael Jackson was about the hits. I mean, Thriller's the greatest selling album of all time. He's the highest selling artist of all time. He's bought in, like, the catalogs of other artists who were the highest selling artists of all time, the Beatles. Meanwhile, Prince was more focused on making strides through his art rather than his numbers. I believe at the time he signed what was, again, at the time, the biggest recording contract in music history, again, at the time, with Warner Music Group, but because he didn't like the terms of that contract, he didn't like how his creative freedom was restricted. I believe, like, he couldn't put out as many albums as he wanted to. They wanted it tight-knit, like a project every year, keep the fans in suspense, put your best work on this project, make it as big, as impactful as possible. Prince, just like Kendrick, was ever evolving, constantly living in the present. The music was a direct reflection of where he was at presently, but in, 5 months from now, he might be in a different state. So he was trying to get out as much music as possible. He was being restricted from being able to do so. So he literally changed his name to a symbol and released music independently without the record label to bypass them, strictly to get as much of his art out to the public, obviously sacrificing, the numbers in the process. Very similar, obviously, to Drake and Kendrick, right? Drake being the number-centric guy on First Person Shooter, literally beating Michael Jackson for the most #1 Billboard Hot 100 hits of all time, which was pretty poetic. Like, the whole last part of First Person Shooter, Drake's talking about, I'm one away from Michael, try to beat it. And then, he literally beat Michael Jackson's record with that song when it went #1. Drake is the numbers guy, but Kendrick is more akin to Prince. He's more focused on the art. He releases, what comes naturally to him in that moment. He's not concerned with the numbers, the charts, the money. There's a lot of goofies with a check. And he's compared himself to Prince many times in the past. On Mask Off, the remix with Future, ironically, Kendrick rapped, she said she broke down when Prince died. It's all right. My hair down. Prince lives through me. I am Prince. And here he's saying, Prince outlived Mike Jack, not only in the literal sense where Prince did live longer than Michael Jackson, but he's saying, like, when it comes to whose legacy is going to outlive whose, it's going to be mine. I am Prince, you are Michael Jackson. I live through the art. My legacy is defined by the messaging in my music. It's not defined by the numbers I put up on the board. And of course, if we do end up dissecting, the diss tracks that come later on in this battle, you'll see Prince and Mike Jack are constant themes throughout them. So drop a comment if you want me to break down each one of the diss tracks. But In the meantime, Kendrick continues, again with all these like little squabble up type of ad-libs, like bomb, like he's just throwing jabs left and right, and he ends it off by saying, for all your dogs getting buried, that's a K with all these nines, he's gonna see Pet Cemetery. So many layers to literally just that one bar, right? So for all your dogs getting buried, of course, call back to Drake's album For All the Dogs. The bar before that, he's talking about Prince, who he's comparing to himself, outliving Michael Jackson. Now he's saying the dogs are getting buried, aka Drake getting buried. That's a K with all these nines. He's going to see the Pet Cemetery. Where do dogs go when they die? Well, they go to heaven, but they get buried in the Pet Cemetery. K with all these nines. A K9 is another word for a dog. K being Kendrick, K dot. K also representing a 10 in a deck of cards. Labry knows a lot about that with all his gambling stake endeavors, but yeah, a K represents 10, and he's saying a K around all these nines. He is the K, he is the 10, surrounded by all the nines, Drake and Cole. A K also being referenced to the firearm AK-47, and a 9 being in reference to the 9mm, the AK being a more powerful weapon. Kendrick is saying he's got the K, he's got the AK, the more powerful weapon. He's fighting against the 9s, the 9mm, the less powerful weapons, aka Drake and Cole, and that's what will lead them into the Pet Cemetery. And I mean, beyond just breaking down the bars of this song, I could go into so many different reasons as to why it was so calculated for Kendrick to drop this when he did, how he did. There's this amazing channel by the name of Absa Effin Lutely. It's spelled ABSAFCKNLUTELY. She explains really well how Kendrick used both the art of war and game theory to dismantle both Drake and Cole effortlessly and put them in the exact position he wanted them to be in. By dropping this verse when they did not have their guard up, both of them being on tour, both of them, having that collaborative nature, that camaraderie at a higher level than ever, even inviting Kendrick to be on first person shooter to, celebrate the whole Big Three theme. This forced Drake and Cole to have their backs up against the wall and be in a reactionary position where they were forced to make a move. It was either they didn't respond and looked weak and essentially accepted Kendrick's final statement as there being no Big Three and he is the top guy, or they were forced to accept the challenge and compete from a standpoint where Kendrick had the upper hand. Kendrick was the one who dictated the terms of this battle. He was the one who started the battle. Yes, I know this was a product of years and years of subliminals from both ends, but I'm saying in terms of who directly said, let's get it up, it's time for you to prove that you're a problem. Without like that, we may have never gotten this battle before. Kendrick most definitely was the catalyst to kick this off, and it was all because of like that. But because of that, again, he can control the entire dynamic of this war, right? Like, he's knowing, okay, either Drake doesn't respond or he does. And in that case, I have a move for both those positions. Drake isn't going to know how to react. I have the time right now. I have the advantage of time to be able to craft diss tracks, craft my next move so that whatever he does, I'm ready to strike back in the most precise way possible. Drake and Cole clapping back to this, again, they're doing it within a compromised position. They don't have their attacks already calculated. They don't have their ducks in a row. They're hugging and kissing on tour. Drake was talking about retiring just like 6 months prior to this. And honestly, that is one thing I'll give Drake a lot of credit for is, thank you for actually participating in this battle. If you didn't drop that lawsuit and you simply just dropped out of the beef and lost, I would still be thanking Drake. But, that lawsuit kind of muddies the water on everything. But story for another day. Yeah, Kendrick was, the puppeteer behind this whole battle. He was able to control the entire narrative because he was the one who striked first. He was the one who decided that there'd be no more collaboration. It would strictly be competition. And J. Cole and Drake, resultingly, were forced to play by Kendrick's rules. Again, he gave them two options. Prove that you're a problem, or prove that all these sentiments were symbolic. That Big Three talk meant nothing. And, we don't need to go through, how Kendrick kind of revitalized hip-hop after this beef, but just to emphasize that, he really put it back on the map. Hip-hop was back to being the #1 most consumed genre in music in 2024. Large in part thanks to Not Like Us, large in part thanks to all these diss tracks, thanks to GNX, thanks to a lot of what came out of the TDE camp with Doechii. Again, like I said, in 2023, the biggest female artist on the rise was Ice Spice. Now we have Doechii winning Grammys for carefully crafted albums, something that an Ice Spice could never do. Doechii gave us a debut album and a moment that we haven't seen in hip hop in a long time. Whether you want to call her an industry plant, which is complete cap, but whether you want to discredit her, she took the route that most artists in the digital space don't take. She really focused on development. She really focused on crafting a cohesive thematic body of work, and it's paying off in dividends now. She very well might be, hip hop's next superstar. And Kendrick bringing hip hop to, bigger stages than it's ever been before, no pun intended. Bringing it to the Super Bowl, hosting shows like the Pop Out, the most streamed musical event in Amazon Twitch history, dropping a West Coast centered album, putting all these new West Coast artists on, and that album, 3 months after fans living with it, is still getting streamed more than the brand new R&B project that Drake just put out. Imagine in 2023, I told you that a 3-month-old Kendrick album would be outselling a 3-week-old Drake album. He dismantled that whole Big Three conversation, with one verse, with one bar. And 2024, I think, by far was the best year in hip-hop we've seen in this decade. 100%. The TDE camp alone, Schoolboy Q, Kendrick, Absol, Doechii, amazing releases from Tyler the Creator, Lupe Fiasco, Denzel Curry, JPEG, massive underground moments, massive mainstream moments. There was everything you want as a hip-hop fan in 2024. And the centerpiece of it was this beef that Kendrick was most definitely the puppet master behind. And I gotta get real personal with you guys for a minute. This beef completely changed my life. I'm not talking about just from, a hip-hop fan's perspective. This beef literally changed my life. Before this verse came out, this channel, Rapaholics, was just a passion project. It was a pipe dream that I hoped, years later, if I generated enough money in my 9 to 5, I was hoping that, maybe one day I could quit that job and take the risk and really go all in on this. Talking about the music that I love, that I grew up with, full time, and building out this community to the point where, I can wake up every day and just do this for a living. It always seemed like a dream. And if you go to the channel and click oldest videos, you'll see that before this beef ever kicked off, we were a long way away from building this into the community that, it is today. The first video I did that ever showed me, I could be lucky enough to the point where, you guys will want to listen to me yap every single day for a living, was right when Kendrick released this verse. My first video that ever got views was called Why Drake Can't Respond to Kendrick Lamar. It was released on March 26th, about 4 days after that was released. I'm from Canada, right? So there's a lot of Drake fans here, and it's such a blessing for me because I've always had these type of conversations with my friends where I'm really the one by myself trying to explain to them why a lot of what Drake has done over the last several years at least has had a negative impact on the genre. So when this beef kicked off, I was just like, you know what? I have so many thoughts about this stuff. No one to talk to about them. No one who at least sees eye to eye with me in that Drake had nothing to gain by jumping into this beef. I might as well just share my thoughts with this channel that I already have. So I shared my opinion on why I thought Drake had everything to lose and nothing to gain by actually engaging in this beef and responding to that. I'll play some of the clips from that very first video that ever did well on this channel, and you guys tell me, because I think a lot of the takes aged horribly and some of them aged well. But before I do that, I really just want to thank you guys. If you guys have been along for the ride, whether it's been, you discovered me yesterday, or you discovered me way back last year when I first said Drake can't respond to Kendrick, or anywhere else along the way, I just want to let you guys know this means the world to me. The fact that I could wake up every day, make these videos for you guys, talk about the genre that, again, I grew up with, that I love. I know as a white dude from Canada, I'm definitely a tourist to this culture, but I love it so much. I grew up on the music. The music has helped me through so much, and I have such a passion for it that, I'm just so thankful that I get to talk to you guys about this every single day. So really, you guys mean the world to me. I don't take this for granted. And I also want to let you know, I know this is a little unrelated to Drake and Kendrick, but if you guys have a dream to start a YouTube channel, to do something, it might sound corny as hell, but making your dreams come true is literally just combining your passion with hard work. If you're passionate about hip hop, if you're passionate about history, if you're passionate about health, if you're passionate about cars, whatever you're passionate about, I'm sure you've studied it long enough where someone on this platform on YouTube will be very thankful to listen to what you have to say about it. And if you continue to post relentlessly every single day, your videos will continue to get better and your voice will undoubtedly get heard. 1000%. Again, making your dreams come true is literally just combining your passion with a lot of hard work. I didn't expect to get to where we got to. I literally just, again, recorded on my iPhone, talking about everything I thought about that, why I thought Drake can't respond, what I thought he could potentially say at Kendrick, what I thought Kendrick could say back at Drake, how I thought this battle might play out if it happens. The last thing that I thought would happen was that that video would take off and it would lead me to quitting my job and continue to every single day delivering you guys this content. And I mean, if you guys have a dream of, starting a channel, I'd love to help. I'd be very, very happy to help. My Instagram is on my channel. Same thing with my email. You guys can shoot me a message on Instagram, shoot me an email. Any advice you'd like on, how to get started with something like this. It'd be an honor to help you guys, get your voice out there and, pursue your passion the same way you guys helped me pursue mine. So it's not really just the 1 year anniversary like that. It's also the 1 year anniversary of Rapaholics, of all you guys, the whole Lobries and Gentlegrams community. And yes, I know we got to start touching on some new topics too, because, the beef has been done for a year. We're obviously going to cover all these diss tracks, but let me know what else you guys want to see. Other artists, other stories. And let me know when you discovered the channel too. Like what stood out to you guys, what you want to see more of. And until next time, let's take a look way back to, again, the video that started it all. Before any full-fledged diss track was released, I want to play you guys some of my thoughts from March 26, 2024, a year ago, on how I thought this whole thing would play out. Let me know where I got it right. Let me know where I got it wrong.
Kendrick, was coming a little more aggressive than Pusha T did, but it just sounds like he's telling Drake, like, listen, like, you think there's no competition out here, but I'm here, I'm better than you, I'm gonna outlive you, and let's see what you're about.
And I really think because of how calculated Drake is with how he kind of maneuvers his brand and his reputation,
I don't think he's gonna respond to this. Now, there's a bunch of different reasons I don't think he's gonna respond to this. Drake could easily ignore this diss, pretend like it never happened, drop another album, and it'll be just as successful as his last album was. I don't think this does anything to Drake's career. Now, if Drake actually engages in this beef and loses, that could be a little rough for him, right? Because it's just going to add a little chink in his armor, a little stain to his legacy where he got outbarred by somewhere else. He can no longer, rap about being the top #1 MC because there's another MC who just destroyed him, right? But if he stays silent, doesn't say a word, what's Kendrick going to do? I don't see any realm of possibility where if Drake stays silent in all this, Kendrick will continue dissing him, right? Like if Drake doesn't respond to this diss at all, I don't think you'll ever hear Kendrick mention it again. It's just not in his character, right? Like I can't see him pulling a Joe Budden and dropping like 20 diss songs at Drake until Drake answers him. And that's another big thing, right? Like with Joe Budden, let's be real. Drake knew he couldn't outbar Joe Budden, but Drake had the advantage at the time because Joe Budden had no mainstream success, right? Like no one in the mainstream really knew who Joe Budden was at the time that he was dissing Drake. So all Drake had to do was ignore him. Joe Budden could put out 25 diss songs against him, and it did nothing. The difference here is people know who Kendrick is. They always pin Kendrick against Drake. But I do think Drake is a chess player, right? He calculates every single move, and I think he could see that if he doesn't say a word about this, it'll blow over in a couple weeks. No one will mention it, and no one will ever speak of this again. Kendrick's not going to come back with 20 diss songs like Joe Budden did. And Drake could just go on and keep having the same career and success that he's been having, and no harm, no foul, right? But if Drake does decide to engage in this, this is just going to turn into a full-out war. And can he really go up head-to-head against Kendrick? I think he knows that he can't. Now, obviously, that's subjective. I'm sure I'll have some people in the comments going at me disagreeing, but like, it is what it is, right? Like, Kendrick is just a lyrical monster. So just keep that in perspective. I hope Drake answers. I think this is great for hip-hop, no matter what. I think we're winning either way, but I'm really curious to see how this plays out. And in the grand scheme of things, I think Drake probably deep down knows it might be smarter for his legacy and for his long-term success and public perception to just let this one slide, go to bed. I mean, he's even putting up Instagram captions saying, his phone's on Do Not Disturb because he's in Turks or something like that. Like, he's not dumb enough to fall into this trap, right? He kind of did fall into it with Pusha T. He fell into that trap, but if he's as smart with his reputation and his moves as I think he has been throughout his entire career, he could probably see that Kendrick is trying to bait him right now. Kendrick is trying to drag him into a war that Drake has a very low chance of winning, let's be real, right? And let me explain to you why Drake has a very low chance of winning this war. Because Drake has went against lyricists before. Like Drake has went against Common, and I would argue he kind of won that beef. And he's went at Pusha T, and I would even argue Drake's diss track, it didn't have the shock value Pusha T's had, but like he came barred up. He came ready to actually rap. But I mean, maybe, music's subjective, but I don't think he holds a candle to Kendrick's technical rapping abilities. And I think he knows that. And I think he knows that if they get into this, full-blown beef where both of them are going at each other with diss tracks, like there's no angle he could take, right? Because let's analyze, some of the last few beefs Drake has had, right? Obviously, he won the beef with Meek Mill. He dropped a hit song. It was the first time since like Hit 'Em Up by Tupac where like a rap diss song was an actual like global hit where you could play it on the radio, you could play it at the clubs, you could play it everywhere. Plus, Meek Mill was just such an easy target at the time, right? He was out on tour with Nicki Minaj. He was opening up for her. He was also super jealous of Drake and Nicki. Like he was a very easy target, Meek. Let's just put it at that. Very easy target. Now with Kendrick, he can't really take that hit song as a diss song approach, right? Like if he goes at Kendrick and responds responds to the shots that Kendrick already took, he can't do it in the form of a hit song, right? Because Kendrick will just come with a bar-focused response and just bar Drake to death, right? Like just hit him with ruthless bars. So he can't come at him the way he came at Meek with a hit song. Plus, the bigger reason is that Kendrick's not really an easy target like Meek Mill, right? What does Drake have against Kendrick? The only thing I could think of is the fact that he brought Kendrick out on tour. Before Kendrick dropped Good Kid, Mad City, he was opening up for Drake on tour. But it's not like Drake put him on. You know, it's not like a PARTYNEXTDOOR or a Weeknd type situation where like Drake introduced Kendrick to the world. Kendrick still had a small following before that, and like the quality of Good Kid, Mad City was what brought him to that level of superstardom that he has. It wasn't because of Drake. So Drake doesn't have enough ammo on Kendrick to make like a really good hit song that is also a diss song against Kendrick. I can't see him making a back-to-back against Kendrick. He's gonna have to come with some bars. But I think he kind of learned his lesson from the Pusha T situation that like he doesn't want to go up against these, you know, these lyrical monsters. I don't think he can do it. I think he knows that. Like, let's be real right now. Drake is not in his prime lyrically. There hasn't been an active rapper making as many hits or big albums or as big of an impact as Drake in years. Kendrick has been inactive. You know, J. Cole is up there 100%. But like, aside from him, who else is making waves the way Drake is? And I think he's kind of taken that as an opportunity to focus more on keeping up with like the youth, working with guys like Beatz or guys like Central C or clicking up with the streamers and all that, instead of focusing on, you know, sharpening his pen and becoming a better rapper, because that's not where the money is, right? Like back in the 2010s, you had guys like Kanye, A$AP Rocky, Mac Miller, Freddie Gibbs, all of TDE, Odd Future, Nipsey Hussle. Like you had all these guys who were super active and their music was more focused on lyricism and bars, right? So Drake had to keep up with that. But nowadays hip hop isn't about that. Like the biggest rap stars right now are Travis Scott, Playboi Carti, Uzi, Future, whoever. These guys aren't focusing predominantly on being strong MCs. They're focusing on melodies and autotune and rage music and unique flows and stuff like that. So Drake is trying to compete in that lane. He hasn't really been focused on progressing as a lyricist, in my opinion, in many years. And for that reason, I don't think he thinks he's prepared enough to go at a guy like Kendrick. His pen isn't sharp enough right now. He's not in that mode. Now, do I hope he gets back in that mode? 100%. I would love to see Drake respond. And you already know that if this turns into a full-out beef, right, like where Kendrick and Drake are dissing each other, Kendrick will keep it strictly hip-hop. This won't be a Pusha T situation where Kendrick is, you know, bringing up that Drake has a kid that he's hiding or some secret, you know, piece of gossip that no one knew about. And it won't be like Meek Mill either, where Meek Mill's exposing Drake for ghostwriters and then just kind of, you know, going off on Twitter and stuff like that. Like there won't be drama involved like that. It's going to be strictly lyric based. It'll be strictly hip-hop.
So, Lobries and Gentlegrams, was I right by saying that Drake should not have engaged in this? Did those takes age like milk or like wine? Let me know in the comments, and I will catch you guys in the next one.